What are the latest rumblings about what the Jazz could do in 2 days' time come draft night? And what players should they consider, according to Tony Jones of The Athletic? Find out next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Jazz. My name's Leif Thulin, and I'm excited and honored to have the opportunity to fill in for David Locke the next few weeks on Locked On Jazz, and this is a big week. It's draft week. I'm a lifelong Jazz fan who's a credentialed NBA draft analyst for Locked On NBA Big Board, attendee of the 2023 Combine, Utah Jazz, broadcast assistant, statistician, and maybe most importantly for this time of the year, lover of college basketball. And because I love stats and basketball, don't expect all of the geeky numbers of usual to be gone, but I'll bring a unique perspective as a diehard college hoops fan, NBA draft fan, and a diehard Jazz fan who wants the Jazz so badly to get this pick right that I'm invested all my emotional energy in this right now. So as the Jazz head to this critical juncture, I want you guys to be as prepared as possible. And that's what we're going to do for you on Locked On Jazz. Thanks today for making Locked On Jazz your very first listen every day. And remember, Locked On Jazz is free and available on platforms including YouTube at Locked On Jazz, where the best way to help us grow is to comment anything below. And today's question of the day is, who is your favorite prospect the Jazz could possibly land, and explain to me how they land them. Today, I'm joined by a special guest, and I'll break down the segments, and then we're going to chop it up and talk some high-level ball. In the first segment, Tony Jones and I will break down some popular narratives and their validity or likelihood of happening and how it impacts the Jazz, because there's a lot of trade talk going on in the top end of the draft. In the second segment, Tony and I will talk about who he believes is the best option at 9 and how it could happen, and we'll play a little back and forth here, because I think we're going to have the same player. And in the final segment, Tony and I will break down what prospects are the favorites for picks 16 and 28, or if the Jazz use all three picks and how they would trade up. So let's dive right in. First of all, thank you for joining me, Tony. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. You forgot to add point guard to your list.
Well, we're kind of combo guards, you and I. We a two-point guard backcourt. The draft is only a few sleeps away, and I know you aren't a diehard Jazz fan like myself and everyone listening to this, but someone who covers the team and adores the draft, you can have a similar appreciation to what I have for how big of a juncture in Jazz franchise history this is. I think it's underrated that the Jazz can really build around what they've got in Markkanen and Kessler with a good draft here, and I think it could accelerate the timeline to contention amazingly.
I 100% agree with that. I think so. I think that Lauri Markkanen becoming an all-star starter level player, and I think Walker Kessler becoming what he's become. I think that it's accelerated the Utah's front timeline a bit. I think it's accelerated a year. I went into this rebuild thinking this was, probably a 3-year rebuild. I think this is probably a 2-year rebuild at this point. I think that if everything goes right for this offseason, and and the buy-in in the locker room is really important. But I think if the buy-in is the same, I think that you can see the Jazz be a play-in level team next year, or maybe even a lower level playoff level team next year. We're talking about a 6 seed or something like that. But they have length on this roster. They have athleticism on this roster. They have a ton of youth. I think that Markkanen and Kessler are really solid, really good building blocks, dynamic building blocks. And, it's just about, what goes on in this draft and what happens a week after that in free agency.
Yeah, and I think you put an important piece in there, is that the Jazz probably weren't going to consider being as aggressive as they may now due to the success that I don't even think they anticipated in Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler. So because of that, I think one of the larger rumors that's being spread around, maybe the first one we can address here, is that the Jazz are going to be looking to make a trade up. A lot of what I've seen has been coming from Mark Stein's report that the Jazz could be interested at Coulibaly at 9 and trading up to 12. So the part I want to address with this is the possibility of trading up. Is it only moving up into the tail end of the lottery with moving 16 and 28 or 16 in a future asset, or the Jazz truly considering moving up in the draft and trying to get the guy, because there's 9 players that I think really have solid potential, and it seems like 10 is kind of the drop off, and the Jazz are within that. But to get their guy, it's more likely than not you'll have to move up.
I would say this, and I think the best way to characterize it is that Utah's phone is ringing and they're answering the phone, and this goes for all over the chessboard, right? This goes for moving up. This goes for moving down. This goes from moving up from 16. This goes from moving down. This goes from, something as innocuous as, the 28th pick, which the Jazz also value as well. They value all 3 of their picks. I would say that, if you asked the Jazz or gave them true serum, I think that they would tell you that their board doesn't stop at 9 players. It probably stops a little bit deeper than that. But I think that there are some best case scenarios, even within that first 9, that the Jazz will like and that the Jazz will covet. They've worked out pretty much the entire draft. I for sure know that they've worked out 95% of the first round of the draft. Maybe they missed a random person here or there, but they've done a ton of homework. They're right now they're in the process of really structuring their final board for Thursday night.
Yeah, and I think it's important to realize that aggression in the draft isn't necessarily all there is for the Jazz. The Jazz have a lot of cap space. They've got the possibility to pursue players. They have an obvious appeal to Kyle Kuzma being from where he is, and that's a guy that's thrown around. So this isn't do or die. The roster will not be the same as it is after draft night. Like, there are additions that can be made. About draft night, though, the Thompson twins, for much of this process, Amen was regarded as the 3rd best player to start, slipped a bit to 4 when Brandon Miller made his ascension, which shout out to both you and I when we played some pickup and talked about him in July, saying he was our top college guy. So Good for us. But if Amen or Ausar fall, do you want to play a little bit of a game of how that could happen? Because I think if Cam Whitmore goes 4, which he could, then 5, the Pistons don't take Amen because they've got their point guards. 6, the Magic are redundant in a lot of spots. So unless Ausar goes 5, then Amen goes 6, and there's still a Thompson sliding. So that means probably Jarris Walker or Taylor Hendricks went 5. 7, the opposite of Walker or Hendricks falls. 8, it's Anthony Black or Ausar Thompson. And I think there's a chance Ausar Thompson's the guy because all reports indicate the Wizards really love Anthony Black.
I don't see any way that Amen Thompson falls to 9. I think that somebody, he's so much the best player available. He's going to be so far the best player available. I
think Ausar could, though.
Yeah. For Amen, I don't see that. I can see Ausar falling. In the way I could see it falling, like you said, Cam Whitmore or Amen Thompson at 4. The Pistons, they go a little bit for fit. Even though I think that Jarris Walker is a dynamic prospect, he goes 5. I think the loser of the Amen Thompson Cam Whitmore derby at 4 goes 6 to Orlando. It's pretty well known that Indiana wants a big at 7, so that takes out Taylor Hendricks, and then Anthony Black goes 8. And then Ausar Thompson is left at 9, which would be, a really, really nice turnout for the Jazz. The Jazz think that he can be a lead ball handler / point guard. He's somebody who reminds you as well of Andre Iguodala. He's the better shooting player of the Thompson twins. He's not the better athlete. But he makes the same kind of reads off pick and roll, same kind of versatile defensive prospect. Needs somebody, at 6'7" that you can plug and play into your backcourt. right away. I made this point on Twitter. Yesterday, but the Jazz with Ochai Agbaji, Lauri Markkanen, and Walker Kessler, those are three of the more athletic guys in the league at their specific spots. And if you add that type of athleticism, a Thompson twin level of athleticism to those first three, then all of a sudden you have one of the more athletic teams in the league. And I'm not sure the Jazz have ever been this collectively athletic if they indeed get, one of the Thompson twins.
And that's what the strength of this draft is. I mean, the Thompson twins, Cam Whitmore, Jarris Walker, Bilal Coulibaly, all these guys that are potentially available for the Jazz. Anthony Black, for that matter, all phenomenal athletes. So last thing here in the first segment, how would a framework of the Jazz moving up, let's say to 5, maybe not 5 or 6, I think 3 gets a little ambitious. You might have to throw in Lauri Markkanen. What would the framework of trading up to 5 or 6 be for the Jazz? And then the second part of this question is, how real is the rumor about Bilal Coulibaly that Mark Stein was reporting at 9 for the Jazz? Because that's quite a rise for someone who could be a tremendous prospect, but that's a rise considering he wasn't even on the team he's on right now at the start of the year.
I would say for the first one, I don't know what a specific framework would look like, but I don't think that the Jazz would give away the store. They're not going to come out with, 3 or 4, future first round picks to move up 4 spots. The Jazz are happy where they are.
Yeah.
And let's put that out there. This is definitively, they are happy to stay at 9. So it's going to be for them to say, okay, let's be aggressive and let's try to move up to 5, or let's be aggressive and let's try to move up to 4. 2 things would have happened. Number one, the very top of their board overall is at that 4 or 5 spot, or somebody in that 3 or 4 spot, probably Brandon Miller, has slipped unexpectedly to 4 or 5. But short of that happening, the Jazz are not, they are happy where they are at 9. They think that they're going to get a really good player at 9. They think that they're going to get a very good player at 16. And they value those assets. They value all of the assets that they were able to accumulate in the Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert trades. So it's going to take something really moving for them to try to be aggressive to move up. As for Bilal Coulibaly, I do know that the Jazz are very interested in him. So I think that they're in a pickle when it comes to 2 players, Bilal Coulibaly or Kobe Buffkin. Both of those guys are guys that the Jazz really, really like. But 9 might be too high.
And 16's too low.
They're probably not going to be there at 16. So it would take 2 things for the Jazz to get one of those 2 players on this team. They draft them at 9, or they trade up from 16 to get into that 12 or 13 range, or wherever one of those 2 guys might be. How likely that is, it's the same. It's the same answer as where you're looking at for 5. The Jazz are happy at 16. They know for sure definitively that somebody they like definitively is going to be there at that 16 pick. So it's just about, who calls, who offers what do the Jazz have to offer? How, expensive is that expenditure moving up 3 or 4 spots? And is it worth it? Is it worth it all around? But Coulibaly and Kobe Buffkin, and even Keontae George, those three guys are one of the reasons why the Jazz just do not see this as a 9-person draft.
Well, that's very important for what the Jazz do. I wouldn't be surprised to see him trade into the back end of the lottery. And coming up next, Tony and I will discuss who he thinks the best option at 9 is. Maybe we'll further discuss what they could do to supplement the 9th pick with trading up to 12 or at 16. But first, let's talk about a sponsor of the show, and let me tell you about BetterHelp. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's so easy to get caught up in what everyone else needs from you and never take a moment to think about what you need from yourself. I mean, sometimes you just get caught up in the world and don't take enough time to treat yourself. But when we spend all of our time giving, it can leave us feeling stretched out and burned out. Therapy can give you all the tools for more balance in your life. So keep supporting others without leaving yourself behind. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can switch your therapist for no additional charge if you find that you may think another person will be more conducive to your health. For more balance, find with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Welcome back into Locked On Jazz. And if you are here to hear about the NBA draft, as I surmise you might be, you might want to check out our ultimate mock draft that only Locked On Network could do, with the hosts drafting for all their teams and analysis provided by myself, Richard Stamen, and Rafael Barlow of the Locked On NBA Big Board. It's a very cool product. It was really fun to be a part of. I recommend you guys check that out. It's available on YouTube. But right now, I'm back with my guy, Tony Jones. Tony and I think alike in the boards. We think alike on the basketball court. But let's talk about what the Jazz what the Jazz are looking at when they're drafting at 9. Say they draft at 9. What could transpire to find your absolute pipe dream for the Jazz? I think we're going to have the same player, so I may play devil's advocate because everyone who's listened to this, the everydayers, know what I think constitutes an A+ draft. But let's hear what Tony Jones thinks constitutes an A+ draft if the Jazz draft at 9.
If the Jazz drafted 9, I would say, and let me preface this by saying this is just my personal. This is just my personal whatever. This isn't me reporting anything or me reflecting anything, because I'm not speaking for the Jazz. But I would say for me, I would probably like to see the Jazz end up with one of Asar Thompson or Jarris Walker at 9.
Or on the same page.
Or and then at 16, one of Bilal Coulibaly, Kobe Buffkin, or even Jalen Hood-Schifino. One of those three. I like Leonard Miller a lot. I would say this, I think Jarris Walker is a game-changing defensive presence. I said this on Bill Riley's show on ESPN 700, but I think that if he hits 100% of his, I think if he hits 70% of his upside, I think he's Paul Millsap. But I think if he hits 100% of his upside, everything goes just right. I think he could be Kawhi Leonard. I think he's a potential two-way monster. And
yep.
I think that he's a guy that you could look back on this draft as in, if you draft him at 9, as in, how in the world did he not go higher than 9?
You're preaching to the choir here. That's precisely what I said when I did I think it was Fridays. I said, if the Jazz could find a way to get Jarris Walker, which would mean that the Pistons would take Osar Thompson, for instance, then 6 would be Amen if Cam went 4. 7, the Pacers decide to take Hendricks, and 8, the Wizards get infatuated with Anthony Black, which they appear to be. Jarris Walker's available. I think that's a very slim likelihood that happens, but that's what I drew as my A+ pipe dream draft. And then the other thing I love so much about that opportunity is at 16, there are 5 guards within the spots from 11 to 17, I think, go. I think there's Keontae George, who the Jazz like. I think there's Kobe Buffkin, who I know the Jazz like. Jalen Hood-Schifino, who you and I are both higher on than the consensus. And then there's Cason Wallace, who has fallen out of the top 9, at least in this case. So now those are 4 guards, and you can make the argument that Nick Smith Jr. is in that same quartet, making it quintet. And I think that's the best possible outcome. You get size and Jarris Walker, someone with enormous potential and a very high floor. And I also likened him to Paul Millsap. So we're really on the same page here. So If the Jazz were to get Jarris Walker, it's most likely a guard. Would you think they'd still be aggressive and trade up to 12 to get Buffkin? Or does the infatuation of maybe Bilal Coulibaly just go best player available? What do you think is more likely in that case?
I think they'll go with the same thing. Like, depends on what the cost is. Mm-hmm. Depends on, where they think, Jalen Hood-Schifino is probably more likely to be available at 16 than Kobe Buffkin is.
Yep.
Keontae George is probably more likely to be, or Nick Smith, they're probably more likely, to be there at 16 than Bilal Coulibaly. Those are the two that if the Jazz don't get, they're likely just going to have to trade up and try to get, but I mean, they have, a lot of these guys are all close in the same tier. I don't think that there's a monstrous difference between Kobe Buffkin and Keontae George. There's a difference in play style, but there's not much of a difference in impact. One's likely to be available at 16. So the thing about it, right? Let's say, you have to, if you're a Jazz fan, you look at pressure points of the draft to see how the draft is falling for you. So if you're in the draft, the first three go in some sort of order as everybody thinks. Then Houston is a pressure point, right? Because who do they pick? Do they pick Amin Thompson or do they pick Cam Whitmore? Because if they pick Amin Thompson, if they pick Cam Whitmore, then Detroit's in the conundrum of they pick either best player available, and that best player available plays the same position as Caden Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, or they go for a dynamic fit, which is Jarris Walker. Well, then boom, all of a sudden, then both Thompson twins are sliding, and then Orlando takes one of the Thompson twins. Indiana takes Taylor Hendricks, and then boom, all of a sudden at 8 and 9, you have Anthony Black and Ausar Thompson, both of whom, that's a great outcome for the Jazz. So the next pressure point after 9 is probably 10, because number one, you can probably do business with the Dallas Mavericks. They probably want a veteran, but you can also do business in terms of giving them extra assets. You might even be able to do business with the Washington Wizards now that they've traded Bradley Beal, now that they've gotten 0 assets back for them. Do you offer them another asset to move up a spot to get a guy that you want? There are so many different. This is going to be such an interesting draft because there's so many different scenarios that need to be played out. There are so many different needs for these teams that need to be played out. And so let's say that Dallas drafts Derek Lively because we know they need a big. Then all of a sudden, all of those guards that are just kind of bunched up in the same tier, they all slide.
Yeah, there's 5 guards in Coulibaly then, and the Jazz would have to be thrilled with that. That leads me to my final question for this segment. Would you, if the Jazz get Anthony Black or Ausar Thompson, for instance, that we've kind of pegged as people that could be available at 8 or 9, so in this case 9, do you think it's more likely the Jazz trade up if they take a guard at 9 as opposed to getting a wing like Hendricks or Walker, because there's such a dearth of guards that could be available at 16? So maybe they'd be more aggressive trying to get Bilal Coulibaly as opposed to trading up for Buffkin because they think that a Hood-Schifino, a Smith, a George will be there.
I don't think the Jazz are looking at it that way, because I think that their roster is a blank enough canvas that they can fill it out whichever one they want. And I think the beauty of Anthony Black, the beauty of Ausar Thompson, even though both of those guys are point guards, they can play with a lot of people. Anthony Black is a lot, he plays a lot like Josh Giddey. Josh Giddey can play with, he can play with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He can play with all of the guards that Oklahoma City has. So if you draft, if the Jazz draft Anthony Black, he can probably play with Keontae George because Anthony Black can guard two guards and Keontae George can guard ones. He can for sure play with Kobe Buffkin because Kobe and Anthony Black, they both get after it defensively. He can definitely play with Nick Smith. He played with him at Arkansas. So let's put it this way. If I came to you in July and I said, guess what, Leif? The Jazz are going to pick 16 in this draft. And with the 16th pick in this upcoming draft, they're going to draft Nick Smith. You would have been like, listen, my friend, I think that ginseng tea is going to your head a little bit. I think the altitude is going to your head a little. Sit over here, watch a game or two, and everything will be fine. Because there was no way that Nick Smith at the beginning of this draft cycle was going to fall to 16. So now there is a distinct possibility that Nick Smith is available at 16. Guess what? We haven't even mentioned Jordan Hawkins yet. And that's another guy that's probably going to be available to the Jazz at 16 as well.
So, what's funny is Nick Smith, I was about as lowest on Nick Smith of anyone around, and I still would have never picked him at 16. I think I had him 12 entering the year, and that was as low as anyone I'd seen. And Brandon Miller was my number 3. So I got one of those right, and then the other one I was lucky. But coming up next, Tony and I will break down what prospects are the favorites for pick 16, which we've done a little bit of, and also at 28, which hasn't been much explored very much. But I think there's going to be a lot of talent available, some due to injuries falling, some with a lot of potential down the road, haven't proven it yet. And we're going to talk about that. But first, a word from Ibotta. Groceries, school shopping, and getting a little something for yourself, you can already do it. Why not get cash back for it with Ibotta? Watching your closet grow after purchasing all of this season's latest trends? How about also watching your cash back grow with each purchase with Ibotta? You can earn cash back on every shopping trip. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items from produce to personal care to pantry goods. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It's that easy. It's simple and easy. The average Ibotta user earns $120 back per year in real cash back. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip or a couple, depending on how many people you shop for. Ibotta gives you real cash back, not points. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you can get real cash back that can cash out into your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. You can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers too when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 for just trying Ibotta with the code LOCKED, LOCKED, when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download free Ibotta app and use code LOCKED. That's Ibotta in the Google Play or App Store and use the code LOCKED. And then last thing for you guys, let me tell you about my friends at Murdoch Hyundai. Murdochs have been in Utah for over 80 years. Hyundai is the best car for your money. It's a great bargain, and they come with amazing quality and good prices as well. Hyundai is the best car for your money. Safety features, bells, whistles, all included in amazing cars at amazing prices. The SUV lineup from the Kona to the Tucson to the Santa Fe from the Palisade. The Ioniq 5 was just named the Motor Trend SUV of the year by Motor Trend, and the new Ioniq 6 is even better. It's amazing, and it's drawn comparison to looking like a Porsche, and it's electric. It just won the World Car of the Year. There are 3 locations in Utah from Linden, Murray, and Logan. Check out Murdoch Hyundai at your nearest convenience, and I really urge you to do so. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. I'm Leif Thulin, joined by the great Tony Jones, and let's talk the favorite pick options for 16. We've done that a little bit, and then we'll explore 28 as well, who the Jazz could target. One thing to note here, we talked about how there's a dearth of guards available at 16, and Tony mentioned as we were going here, that's why I wanted to break it there and talk about a guy like Jordan Hawkins. Hawkins, to me, is someone I have a little bit lower, even though I've been high on him through 2 college basketball seasons as a diehard college fan. Can you give a pitch as to why the Jazz would be super intrigued by him, despite being a fairly thin 2-guard who is just a 2-guard? Because I think he is the best shooter in this class.
Well, I think you just said it right there, right? If you can draft at 16 and you can draft a guy who is the best singular player in the draft at a singular skill, then that's a lot of value at 16. The Jazz got the 22nd pick of the draft last year, which turned out to be Walker Kessler, which turned out to be in the Rudy Gobert trade. They didn't draft him, but they traded for him. He turned out to be the best rim protector in the draft at 22. But he also turned out to be a lot more, but that's neither here nor there. But if you get the best rim protector in the draft at 22, if you get the best shooter in the draft at 16, if you get the best passer in the draft at 20, those are tremendous value spots to get somebody that has a singular skill. I think what you want to do, you want to get the best player available at number 9, for sure. Whoever's the best player on the board, whoever the Jazz feel is the best player on their board, draft that person. It could be different than who we think is the best player on the board, but whoever they think is the best player on the board, that's who you draft. But if you can get somebody like a Jordan Hawkins, who is the very definition of a weapon shooter, who you know is going to be in the league 10 to 15 years from now because of how well he shoots the basketball, because of where he shoots the basketball from, how he shoots it on the move, and the versatility that he shoots the basketball from, then I think that's something that's valuable at 16 for me.
I'm lower on Hawkins, and it's the same reason I'm lower on Grady Dick. I think both of them are offensive players, and I've made this point many a times about Grady Dick, is that his ceiling to me is Kevin Huerter, and I think that might be even generous. And Kevin Huerter was played off the basketball court in the playoffs. And if I'm drafting for a team like the Utah Jazz, who likely won't have the ability to ever pull a superstar in free agency, they'll have to trade or draft them. I think those type of players are less impactful than guys who play two-way basketball, because even though they have an amazing trait, that the Jazz need more just like steady players, because they can't afford the luxury player that you can afford when you've got a guy like LeBron James, or especially prime LeBron James, where you could just surround him with certain luxury players. But that might just be my personal preference. That the reason I bring that up, though, is that's why I love a guy like Noah Clowney or Leonard Miller at 16 for the Jazz. And both of those are typically regarded as lower end boards, but I think they'll go around there on draft night just because they can play 4 and 5. In Leonard Miller's case, he maybe can play the 3. I think both of them have positional versatility, upside, and tremendous floors, being 6'10" with plus 7-foot wingspan and the ability to guard multiple positions. So to me, I'd prioritize versatility if the Jazz take a guard. And I think, and I'm typically best player available, but if they take a guard, I want a wing. And if they take a wing, I'm all in on the guard, just because that's where the strength of the draft is.
No, for sure. And, I think, you look at even guys like Dariq Whitehead, you can get him at somewhere around 16. I think that's a lot of value there. I think that you look at somebody like Leonard Miller, who, improved a lot over the course of the G League season, put himself in a really good spot, because at the beginning of the draft cycle, Leonard Miller was, deep in the 20s. And I think that he's fought his way up. I think he's fought his way up to even on the brink of the lottery. If somebody really decides to take a swing on him. So take a swing for him. So, I do agree with you in terms of, just guys that can do a lot of things, guys that are connectors, over a guy with a singular skill. And I certainly agree with you, with the Jazz. If as a reporter, I think that if the Jazz leave this draft with 3 guys that they know can stay on the floor in the playoffs, then that's a successful draft for them. So that likely means they're going to have to draft 3 guys that can play some sort of semblance of offense and defense. We don't know that Jordan Hawkins can do that. We definitely do not know if Grady Dick can do that. And that was the problem with Kevin Huerter. And I think that could be the problem with Grady Dick as well. Grady Dick could very well average 20 to 22 points a game in the regular season, and then kind of be I don't want to say be rendered useless, but kind of played off the floor in the playoffs. So we have to see Grady Dick defend. And this is not just Grady Dick. Keontae George has to prove the same thing. Bilal Coulibaly has to prove the same thing the other way. Jet Howard has to prove the same thing. Bryce Sensabaugh has to prove the same thing. The reason why there are 9 guys for me who separate themselves from the draft in this draft is because I know that all 9 of those guys will be able to play in the playoffs. All 9 of them. And there's nothing in those 9 guys that are going to prevent them from being on the floor in the playoffs. Everybody else, in some sort of form or fashion, it's kind of hard right now. Outside of the 9 guys, off the top of my head, I think Kobe Buffkin can play in the playoffs because he plays defense and he plays offense. I think Derek Lively can probably play in the playoffs because he can make shots, he plays defense, and he can also defend on the perimeter. But you have to look for those guys as well.
Yeah, we're of the same mind. I've changed my drafting philosophy the last few years. It's, can this player help me win a playoff series, as opposed to, can this guy put up stats? Because there are guys that can put up stats and they're empty. Let's talk about where the Jazz, because of being a smaller market team, maybe they don't make this pick. Maybe they combine it and trade up and be aggressive as they have all these assets. This is the time to be aggressive. But should the Jazz pick at 28? Name a few players that you like, and then I'll name a few I think are good possibilities, and we'll see if we're on the same page to conclude the show.
Same guys that I like at 28, that I like at 16, I like at 9, guys that help you win, that I think can help you win playoff series. Andre Jackson out of UConn, Julian Strother out of Gonzaga. Oh my God. My guy out of UCLA,
Jaime
Jaquez.
Yeah,
Jaime Jaquez is probably one of my favorites for the Jazz at 28. Like if they can find a way to get Jaime Jaquez at 28, like that's a steal for me. Who do you got?
I'm actually a little bit the opposite way on this one. I want potential. If I'm picking at the 28th pick.
Oh, you want Gigi Jackson?
Oh, I desperately want Gigi Jackson. That's pipe dream. I wouldn't even be mad if he's the pick at 16. I don't think that's what they'll do, but at 28, if he's there, I'd be thrilled. I mean, here's the pitch. If he were in the 2024 NBA draft like he was supposed to be, he's the youngest player in this draft, barely eligible, he'd be a top 3 pick. So why not pick him a year early with a guaranteed first round, get an extra year on his contract, and now you have a potential top 5 pick the next year at 28 on your team. That would be my favorite pick. Another guy that I think has a similar appeal would be like Julian Phillips from Tennessee.
Yeah,
someone that's tremendously athletic, played on a veteran team, didn't get to showcase his full ability, shot 82% from the free throw line, really good athlete, really good defender. And then if I were to go with more of like a steady, ready to contribute guy, I like Kobe Brown out of Missouri. A big body shooter, shot 45% from 3, had 44 dunks, I think. So he's a good athlete, really functional. So I think slightly lean.
Kobe Brown is a lot better than people think.
Oh yeah,
he really is.
That's the way I'd go about it.
What about Colby Jones out of Xavier?
I'm lower on Colby Jones because I think he's good at a lot of things in college basketball, but he's a master of none. And I think when you're not a great shooter and you're going to play off-ball guard, even though he's probably better at a point guard, that I think there's limited roles for him. I think he could thrive in a set one, like almost in like a Kyle Anderson-like role, but like smaller Kyle Anderson. But I don't love him as much for what I think the Jazz need.
What Georgetown player are you picking in the first round?
I mean, I'd have to think about that one.
Don't answer that.
I'll take last year's Aminu Muhammad.
Don't know. Listen up.
Tony, I know you just wanted to hear my knowledge of Georgetown basketball.
Yes, I'm just extolling my love for the Hoyas. Go Hoyas. Yeah, so no Georgetown players yet.
Yeah, I like a lot of Big East players, maybe not a Georgetown guy. But thank you to my guy, Tony Jones, right here. We'll see who makes a nasty backcourt mate like Tony and I for Lowry, Markkanen, and Walker Kessler as future teammates. And everydayers who listen to Locked On Jazz every single day, look forward to tomorrow's show, one day away from the draft, where I'll break down if the Jazz will try to kind of repair the deficiencies that, like, maybe if the Jazz take Osar Thompson, do they take a shooter like Jordan Hawkins? And if they take a big, do they take a guard? I'll go through all of those possibilities and who and what it could look like tomorrow. And until then, have a great day. And as always, and you guys know it, go Jazz.